The story of Daryl Hannah is the story of a glitch in the Hollywood Matrix. It's about what happens when someone is fundamentally, beautifully, out of sync with the machine that made them famous. She delivered some of the most iconic and disparate images of the 1980s, the feral, glass-eyed replicant in the perpetual rain, and the sun-drenched mermaid discovering love on a New York pier. Yet she herself remained an enigma, a ghost in the spotlight. And her career wasn't a decline. It was a deliberate fade, a conscious uncoupling from a world that demanded a performance she could never give, not just on screen, but in every corridor, meeting, and red carpet hall. To understand what happened to Daryl Hannah is to understand the cost of authenticity in an industry built on artifice. Born in Chicago in 1960, Daryl Christine Hannah's inner world was intense and insular from the start. Described as painfully shy, she found the chaos of human interaction overwhelming, seeking solace instead in the controlled narratives of classic films, the precise discipline of ballet, and the private language of music. In a later era, her childhood behaviours, the rocking for comfort, the aversion to eye contact, the deep, singular focus would be recognised as traits on the autism spectrum. At the time, they were simply seen as odd. This perceived oddness was deemed a professional liability so severe that her first agent dropped her, stating bluntly that she was too strange to ever make it as an actress. It was a brutal, early verdict that framed her difference as a weakness, a flaw to be corrected. Hannah, however, didn't try to correct it. She weaponized it. After formal study, she immersed herself in the craft, training under the legendary Stella Adler. Her dedication was total, extending beyond acting to the mechanics of filmmaking itself. She worked behind the camera, learning editing and direction, a holistic approach to cinema that was rare for a young actress at the time, and signaled a mind that engaged with the world through creation, not just participation. Her early film appearances were brief, but striking. It was the year 1982, however, that marked the true inflection point. Ridley Scott's Blade Runner offered her the role of Pris, a basic pleasure model replicant. There was nothing basic about her incarnation. So, with her shock of white blonde hair, kabuki-inspired makeup, and a physicality that switched between jerky, childlike wonder and lethal, acrobatic fury, she was a haunting vision. In a film obsessed with what makes one human, Hannah's Pris was the most potent question mark, a being of pure, unpredictable instinct. She didn't just act in that dystopian world. She seemed excavated from it, a beautiful and broken piece of its machinery. That performance announced the arrival of a singular presence, one the industry didn't know how to categorize. Hollywood, confused but captivated, tried to slot her into a familiar mold. Her very next major role did the opposite. In Ron Howard's 1984 fantasy splash, she played Madison, a mermaid. The genius of her performance lay in its inversion of the Blade Runner aesthetic. Gone was the layered makeup and predatory tension. Here was open-faced wonder, a guileless curiosity, and a vulnerability so palpable it made the fairy tale feel emotionally documentary. She conveyed the character's alien nature not through effects, but through a profound, unactorly sincerity. The film was a blockbuster, making Tom Hanks a movie star and cementing Hannah as a bankable leading lady. She was now simultaneously associated with two radically different icons, the deadly futurist doll and the innocent creature of myth. This dichotomy should have launched a decade of versatile leading roles. Instead, it highlighted a tension that would define her path. The industry expected her to leverage this fame into a conventional career of romantic comedies and studio vehicles. Daryl Hannah had other ideas. She chose the near-silent, physically arduous role in The Clan of the Cave Bear, a prestige gamble that flopped but proved her artistic fearlessness. She then delivered one of her most perfectly realised performances in Roxanne, 1987, the modern retelling of Cyrano de Bergerac. As the smart, warm astronomy student Roxanne Kowalski, she displayed a grounded, witty charm. Her chemistry with Steve Martin feeling organic and gentle. She proved she could be a conventional romantic lead while retaining her unique, off-kilter grace. Yet when cast in Oliver Stone's financial epic Wall Street that same year, she felt a profound disconnect. She saw her character, the interior decorator Darian, as shallow and struggled to find her footing. She reportedly asked to add depth and was refused. This experience was a microcosm of the larger struggle. Hollywood kept offering her a version of womanhood she couldn't psychologically inhabit. Throughout the late 80s and early 90s, she worked consistently in the iconic ensemble of Steel Magnolias, the popular grumpy old men comedies, but often in supporting parts. Her luminous, atypical quality didn't fit the new, more cynical leading roles of the 90s. While peers reinvented themselves, Hannah seemed to retreat. The reason, which she only fully articulated years later, was rooted in that childhood oddness. The autism spectrum traits that fueled her intense on-screen focus made the off-screen Hollywood ritual agonizing. The sensory overload of premieres, the social performance of interviews, the expectation of constant, charming accessibility, it was a minefield. She described hiding behind curtains at events to cope. What journalists interpreted as aloofness or difficulty was, in fact, a person experiencing acute distress in an environment fundamentally hostile to her neurology. But the industry, which thrives on extroversion and personal branding, had no framework for a star who found the spotlight physically painful. Just when her narrative seemed settled as a fondly remembered figure from a past era, Quentin Tarantino delivered her a stunning third act. As Elle Driver in Kill Bill, the one-eyed, venomous assassin, Hannah underwent a total and exhilarating reinvention. Any lingering trace of the mermaid or the shy girl was annihilated by the swagger, the cruelty, and the dark humor she brought to the role. Ooh. That now, iconic whistle in the hospital corridor was a statement. She was back, and she was formidable. The performance was critically hailed, a reminder to a new generation of her formidable power. It should have triggered a major comeback. It didn't. The offers that followed failed to match the creative audacity of Elle Driver, and Hannah, true to form, didn't chase them. She had used the platform not to re-enter the Hollywood fray, but to fund her exit on her own terms. Daryl Hannah didn't vanish. She transferred her intensity to a new stage. She became a fierce, frontline environmental and indigenous rights activist, chaining herself to trees, blocking bulldozers, and getting arrested. She built a sustainable, off-grid life. In 2014, she married musician Neil Young, a fellow iconoclast, and retreated to a private life focused on environmental stewardship and creative independence. Her later acting work became sporadic and selective, small roles in projects like Sense8 that aligned with her values. Opening up about her autism diagnosis provided a public key to her private history, reframing her a disappearance, not as a failure, but as an act of self-preservation and integrity. So, what happened to Daryl Hannah? The question itself is rooted in a Hollywood-centric view. She didn't fade away, she evolved away. Her career arc challenges the standard narrative of fame. She refused the relentless self-reinvention required for perpetual visibility. From Pris to Madison, from Roxanne to Elle Driver, she played women who existed outside the system, and then she chose to live as one. Her legacy is a collection of stunning, disparate screen moments and a far more powerful lesson. That sometimes walking away from the bright lights isn't a defeat, but the ultimate expression of a self that was never truly for sale. She remains the glitch, the unforgettable error in the code that, in the end, proved to be the most human element of all.